are about to experience, Jackson Snyder presents. Direct from the VSDC Yet, a Hebrew Nation radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents.
Hello, my friends. It's 4:30 in the morning. I just can't sleep. So I decided to look at a few articles online here, and I found one that, well, I'll just take the time to go through, if you don't mind, because it's a topic that I'm really interested in, and that is the Great Jewish Revolt of 66 CE or AD, the very same one that John the Revelator wrote about in his mighty and historical account of the persecution of the saints during the first century. The Roman Empire in the early first century was often regarded as the perfect empire. The outstanding military prowess of the Romans was used to expand the empire, and once the territories were acceptably pacified, Roman political power was installed from the capital of the empire to the local governments of its territories, perfectly balanced between a mixture of hard, that is, military occupation and intervention to upkeep Roman law and instill Roman religion, and soft power, entertainment, technology, and trade. Roman rule was generally accepted and enjoyed almost everywhere the empire landed. Some subjects of Roman rule were happy to trade their religious freedom in favor of the cult of Caesar, or Caesar, for the benefit of sanitation. Well, for example, but there are a lot of other things, especially the entertainments. Palestine had long been Hellenized for nearly 400 years, since 312 BC, under Seleucus I Nicanor. Greek culture flourished in Palestine. However, after the Hasmonean dynasty, I'm talking about the Maccabees, this Hellenization became more than that of Greek culture and the cosmopolitan way of life. With the Romanization of the Jewish Hellenized classes came listen to this, a recrudescence of corruption. Why couldn't he just say recurrence? Recrudescence? Who's ever heard of that word? Anyway, again, with the Romanization of the Jewish Hellenized classes came a recurrence of corruption that had previously flared under Antiochus IV Epiphanes and the Seleucid Hellenistic Greek rule. The local Greeks and the Hellenized Jewish elite supported the Romans, and as such, enjoy the finer things that the Romans could deliver. Maybe you would too. Maybe I would. The Jewish elite became more aware of their higher place in society, and they did whatever they could to keep the status quo. The Sadducees, the elite of which the Romans favored, and the elite that favored the Romans, had the majority of the Sanhedrin in their grip, and they defended Herod, the client king of Rome. But not all Jewish people supported the Herodian stance, however. The Pharisees, who arguably, and I might argue this, merged into the Zealot party, were deeply opposed to it and were incensed by the inroads that Hellenism continued to make into Jewish religion. So why is it that the Pharisees made a deal with Rome that resulted in the Jamnia Jewish Academy that took the teeth out of the Torah and denied the Messiah? Well, I guess those Pharisees that were real may have joined the Zealots, but we know that consensus Pharisees joined with Rome. That's history. For the Romans had unintentionally nurtured a class divide in the Jewish religion that was created under the reign of the Seleucids. That is the Syrian Greeks, the empire to the east. The ingrained corruption of the Senate-appointed Roman procurator was transferred into the local Jewish and non-Jewish authorities. They ignored the plight of the Jews. Most of the profits of the goods that were sold in the markets of Jerusalem did not go into Judean hands, not into the Judean economy. Rather, they went straight to the elite, thus enraging the common Jewish man. That's why we know that the mark of the beast was the tax stamp. They took away the majority of what everyone earned, that is, the small farmers, those of small business, took away their taxes to the point where they could hardly even feed themselves with their farm. The tax stamp. The common Jewish businessman was enraged, and certainly the apostles, who were small businessmen, were enraged as well. According to Josephus, a contemporary Roman Jewish historian who fought alongside the Jewish people in the revolt for a while, the sheer ineptitude of the Roman governors of the province was the main cause of Jewish anger. The indifference and malice from the Judean governors reflected the malice of the emperors of Rome. When Pontius Pilate was elected by the Senate to take the reins of the procurator of Jerusalem in 27 AD, the relations of the common Jewish man and the Roman people were in tatters. Pilate shared the same disdain for the Jewish people as Emperor Tiberius, and quickly began to bring about a new kind of cult to replace the Jewish religion in that area. Did you know that Pontius Pilate is a saint in the Catholic Church? We can hardly believe that Pontius Pilate had any kind of love or even respect for the Jewish people. That man was a psychopathic murderer, and the only way that he could have possibly been turned towards mercy is the power of Yahweh. However, Yahweh hardened his heart. And speaking of the devil, in 64, Gessius Florus presided over Judea. He had the same indifference to the Jewish populace as Pilate, but he didn't have the political intellect to calm the tense Jewish society when things turned sour. In other words, as Josephus states, Florus was incompetent. Well, they had Fatus, Felix, Florus. 3 horrible, corrupt governors, and before that, I can't remember his name. This artificial class divide, the corruption of both the local and Senate governments in the area, and the unbridled disdain for the Jewish people brought about a riot in Caesarea in 66 CE AD. There, the Zealots, a band of unhellenized, anti-elite Jews, wiped out the Roman-backed elite Greeks that had inhabited the area. There was a civil war right in Caesarea, Greeks against Jews. But Gessius Florus, in a rage of scorned hubris, plundered the Holy Temple to fund the cult of Caesar and erected statues of Emperor Nero and himself with the money he took. This obviously enraged the Jewish people. The temple was not only the center of religious and social life for the Jewish people, but it was a sign of Elohim's presence in the holy city. When Florus raided the temple and ordered the residents nearby to follow his form of polytheism around it, it was the biggest insult to the Jewish religion. The religious Jewish people rebelled. But I've got to tell you that most of the people in Palestine at the time that were Jews were cultural Hellenists, and they did not rebel. In fact, in many cities, according to Josephus, there were civil wars between Jews and Greeks, but the fact is, those two factions were both Jewish by blood, but not by culture. Soon, random attacks on Roman citizens followed throughout Judea, particularly in the northern towns. There, in areas such as Narbata, the Jewish people overthrew the Roman government. Oh, that Galilee. We don't dare even walk down the road for fear of being hit in the head and then passed by priests and Pharisees. In response to this Jewish victory at Narbata, The Roman legion in Syria, backed by the neighboring Scythica, attempted to quell the Jewish rebellion. The Syrian Romans took large areas of the north of Judea and Galilee that had revolted without much effort. The Romans spread themselves too thin, however, and were ambushed and defeated on the coast of Judea at the Battle of Beit Horon. This was a huge victory for the rebels. The Syrian Romans abandoned their posts and fled back to Syria. But Emperor Nero, angry at the impudence of the Jewish rebels, sent the Roman military general Vespasian to destroy the rebel armies and punish the citizens in the Judean province. Vespasian and his son Titus returned stronger to Judea with more men and slaughtered nearly every Jewish rioter in Caesarea and northern Galilee. Around 10,000 Jewish people were either killed or sold into slavery. When we read in Revelation 13 about the beast with the two horns, there we are talking about Vespasian and his son Titus, each attacking Israel in a pincer movement like two horns. But you don't want me to get into that. And I don't want to because I get too much persecution for believing that Revelation has already happened. The remaining Jewish rioters fled Caesarea to Jerusalem. There the Jewish people stopped paying taxes in the temple and indiscriminately murdered Roman soldiers that were stationed there. The Zealots and the Sicarii, that is the dagger men, overran the Roman military garrison from Jerusalem. This was a heartening victory for the Jewish people, as support for the Zealots for the Torah, in other words, in the city grew. This sense of Jewish dominance over the Romans was very short-lived. Of course, by the year 67, the Romans under Vespasian and Titus had taken back all of Judea and killed the Jewish rebels that were left. The Jewish strongholds of Jotapata, after a 47-day siege, were now under Roman control. The Romans were on the march to Jerusalem. That siege of Jotapata is explained in detail in Josephus' Jewish War, for he was there trying to defend Jotapata. And if you don't know about that battle, write to me, I'll send you an account of it. History is exciting. The perspective of the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, that is mainly Sadducee Jerusalemites, had shifted dramatically from elation to panic. They knew that the revolt would not be a success for long, and they implored the Zealots to surrender peacefully in order to save as many Jewish lives as possible. But the Zealots refused. I think in my readings, more than to save Jewish lives, they were intent on saving their own bankrolls. The Sadducees couldn't give a pencil for the Jewish people. They lived so high and mighty, they were so rich, and they got their riches from the backs of the poor businessmen of Israel. The Zealots anticipated the insurrection that would have doubtless come if the more moderate Jewish leaders were listened to by the common people. As a result, the Zealots and the fanatical Sicarii, dagger men, publicly executed them and hung their dead bodies so that everyone could see the repercussions of preaching insurgent messages of peace. This article has a slant. Messages of peace, more like messages of subjugation. The moderate leaders in Jerusalem at the start of the revolution in 66 had all been killed by 68, and not one by the hands of the Roman aggressors. They were killed by the Sicarii and the Zealots. Only one got away. His name was Matityahu, and he was the father of Flavius Josephus, and he may also have been the disciple of Yahshua HaMashiach that we call Matthew. Been a lot of speculation on that. Shortly before the siege of Jerusalem, a civil war broke out in Rome. Most people don't know this. The civil war in Rome at the same time, Jerusalem was burning, Rome was burning. Just like Revelation 18 says, that they set the whore on fire. But Vespasian became the new emperor in 69, taking over from Nero, and Titus, the second in command in the war, took up the reins of the war. The Romans were at the gates of Jerusalem in 70, besieging the walls. Go look at my podcasts. I have that whole story on audio for you, the siege of Jerusalem. It's 5 o'clock now, and I know I should be going to bed, but let's see if we can get a little farther here. Once the panic had hit, there was no reversing. Try as the zealots might, they knew that the constant stream of different opinions held by different factions of Jewish people was a hindrance to the zealot leadership inside the city. They wanted an all-out war instead of the war of attrition that some had planned for. The zealots, led by a deceiver named Yochanan of Giscala, decided to further engage the population to participate in the revolution by burning the crops and burning the dried foods that the Sadducees and the Pharisees had stored in expectation of the Roman siege. They burned all the foods in Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem was walled and was surrounded by armies. Nobody got out, and the food was gone. And their burning of the food worked to some little extent because, according to Josephus, nearly 1 million Jewish people from both sexes, including children, signed up to defend the city after the burning of the food. Yet it also had disastrous consequences. The city dwellers, the soldiers, starved. Those who didn't suffer due to malnutrition died at the instigation of the zealots and the Sicarii. It was so bad, people were eating their boots. People were tearing the leather off shields and trying to eat it. People were eating any green, growing thing that they could find. And people were eating children. As the days went by, the Roman army accepted that the only way to reconquer the city was to set up a camp just outside the walls. It was a method of range fighting. Anyone that tried to escape the city was crucified and placed either on a cross or on a wall facing the city, that is, to be nailed up there. Terrified, the Jewish population inside the walls knew that they had to fight or run a high risk of dying in the most disrespectful way imaginable. Finally, after a 7-month range battle, the Romans had damaged the city walls enough to be able to breach them. In the summer of 70, the Roman soldiers penetrated the city. The obvious military superiority was on show as the Romans forced the zealots into fighting on the streets. The Romans were destroying and burning the city and slaughtering the Jewish people in their wake. What Jewish people were left after the zealots and the Sicarii got done with them. They retreated to the temple. The Roman legion, after several attempts at breaching the walls, set fire to the holy temple. And it was quite accidentally, for Titus had commanded the soldiers not to destroy the temple. However, the site that once gave thousands of Jewish people hope was destroyed. Elohim, it seemed, was no longer in the city. Josephus reports that some heard the voice when Elohim left, saying, "Let us go hither." This was the most devastating blow to the Judea. The rest of the city was plundered and burned to the ground soon after the temple fell. The Romans crushed the remaining beleaguered Jewish resistance. Jerusalem was under complete control of the Romans by September of 70. In all, Josephus claims over 1 million Jewish people were killed. That is within the city only. The rest that were captured were sold into slavery, many taken back to Rome, to Pompeii, to Greece, sold all over the place, to Britain. It was a dispersion of Jews that included the Nazarenes. 70,000 Jewish slaves built the Roman Colosseum, and the Colosseum was financed by the gold of the temple. The temple was destroyed, never rebuilt. which instigated a new form. I just have to emphasize this. A new form of Judaism. A new form of Judaism, that is Rabbinic Judaism. Rabbis were now the focal point of the religion, taking over from the high priest. I have trouble with this time, and the Academy at Jamnia, and the Pharisee rabbinic compromise of their faith with Rome, and them being really the only type of Judaism that survived through compromise. And we have rabbinical Judaism today. That is not normative Judaism. What we call Jewish today is radically sectarian from the time in 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed. The rabbis made a deal, and some of their stories are recorded in the Mishnah, and some of them are amazing, how they escaped being killed, and some of them are just downright funny. Yet rabbis were, by that time, the focal point of the religion, taking over from the high priest. The synagogue became the center of Jewish life, and with the diaspora, the Torah became the most invaluable source of knowledge for the Jewish people. That is, a Torah that had been modified to a great extent, and a canon in which the apocalyptic, ecstatic, Enochian, and Essene books, and in some cases the Sadducean books, were not considered for the Jewish canon of about 90 AD. Go and listen to the whole story. This article by a college student, Harry Oates. What a name. Harry Oates. It's pretty good, though it certainly is consensus. But how are you going to put a 7-year war into a half-an-hour article? The only way you can do that is if you're siding with the winning party. Read or listen to Josephus' account. Maybe I'll put it on right after this one, or maybe end this one up with it. You will feel pity and compassion as maybe you never did before. And you will find that what happened in the first century is very similar to many such debacles as are happening today. My friend, that is the Great Jewish Revolt of 66 CE by Harry Oates.
Esteem and the lifter of my head. I cried to Yahweh with my voice, and he heard me from his mountain. I laid me down to sleep. I awoke, for Yahweh sustained me. Now I am not afraid of 10,000 enemies. Your blessing is here upon me. Your blessing is here upon me. O Yahweh, you're a shield to me, my esteem, you're the lifter of my head. I cried to you with my voice, and I know you heard me from your mountain. Well then, sir, I laid me down to sleep. And then I awoke, for you sustained me, O Yah. Now I am not afraid of 10,000 enemies. Your blessing is here upon me. Your blessing blessing is here upon me. Yes, I can feel it. Oh, thank you, Father.
You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio.